Welcome to the fourth in our series of the in8model quadrants. Here we have quadrant 4. This is a place where those who suspect they're innately wise, brilliant and powerful come to learn how to transform their lives. One cognition, one realization and one blinding flash of the obvious at a time. We are the innovators, the record breakers, the world makers and creators of all kinds. We supersede the suppressive worldview of mass ignorance and awaken the strength within. We are waking up to our innate secrets. My name is Dr. Mark Postles and welcome to the Innate Secrets podcast. So the information then passes from quadrant 1 through quadrant 2, through quadrant 3, through quadrant 4. So that's from the right frontal to the left basilar, to the right basilar to the left frontal. And as you recall, the quadrant 4 and quadrant 1 share the frontal areas of the brain, and that's a big picture thinking. The quadrant 4 is on the left-hand side, so there's a structure and an order to the quadrant 4 that isn't necessarily part of the quadrant 1's viewpoint. So the quadrant 4 is quite a unique area, and there's not a large number of people that occupy this space as a preference, as a major preference. We all have all parts, as you recall from our discussion previously about the innate model, that we have all parts. However, our value structure will determine how we fire those parts and in what order and what preference. So the universal mind is a subject which is being talked about more and more, and that is the field of information that we are immersed in, the field of information that's all around us and that we broadcast into and we receive information from. And the quadrant 4 seems to be very adept at tapping into that. It gets information from unknown sources. It just knows. And we call it intuition. And the quadrant 4 just seems to know those blinding flashes that just come in, and the quadrant 4 part will act on it because it's a trusting area in terms of allowing information to be seen as it is rather than filtered through some of the hindbrain stuff which would tend to distort that information and make it more survival related. So this is the home of that intuitive mind. And it's always looking to reinvent things. So it'll say, what else? And what if we did this? What if we did that? What else could we do? How could we improve this particular situation, this product? It will intervene in any situation that's a bit staid or a bit ordinary and break it and create pattern interrupts for it and look at how it can go to a new level. So it's impulsive. It wants to do things now. The quadrant 4 part is just like, hey, let's just get on with it. Let's not sit around talking about it. Let's do it. And so it's very action oriented. It enjoys the disruption of politics. It enjoys the disagreements and debates and arguments that can come in political areas. And so I would see this as the political area of the brain, in that if we look at each of the quadrants, quadrant 1 tends to be more philosophical, and quadrant 2 tends to be more organized and structured, and quadrant 3 is more about production and application, and quadrant 4 is about tearing it apart and creating it in a new way, in a new system, and making things better. And that, of course, feeds into the quadrant 1 again. So in that, it can be very blunt, and particularly to the more sensitive opposite, which is quadrant 3. And so the quadrant 4 can just say it as it sees it. It doesn't go for niceties. It just goes for what it wants. And it's very concerned with the bottom line. So quite opportunistic. So some of the character traits of this quadrant 4 part is that it loves challenges and adventure. It judges itself by achievement. So it will have a tick on its to-do lists, and could be quite long and quite extensive, and loves to just tick them off. Very action-oriented, and tends to have an air of invincibility because it is very much about itself. You know, the quadrant 4 has an internal reference for itself that at the same time it likes to have its stamp on things. So style and labeling and categorization and, its name on the door sort of approach is a Quadrant 4 style. It is bottom line, just wants to take care of business and take control of things so that it comes across as quite competitive, and it will designate out to others, but there is a tendency to want to do too much and become a workaholic that can really drive, or it's a very driven part of the brain. And whilst it does see the big picture, it can be very critical and quite destructive sometimes towards those parts that are serving it, particularly the Quadrant 3 part. The bottom line, though, is it gets things done. Just is goal oriented, likes to tick things off and get in there and make things happen. So it's a very strong-willed part of the brain when it's in full flight, and it really doesn't suffer fools gladly, and it just likes to get the organisation moving and see a profit at the end of the day or a result at the end of the day and move on to the next thing. So Mark Victor Hansen made a statement which typifies the Quadrant 4 style, and that is that action eradicates fear. No matter what your fear, positive, self-affirming action can diminish or completely cancel that which you are fearful of. And that is the modus operandi of the Quadrant 4. It doesn't sit around worrying and wondering. It just goes into action, and it's ready to fire and then aim and re-aim and re-aim and re-aim. And it doesn't have any problem with failing because it sees itself as that's another step towards success. So action-oriented, willing to get out there, and that's the styling of this part of the brain. It fires on sometimes what appears to be no information, and so often it turns out to be very accurate in retrospect. So in the extreme, however, Quadrant 4 can be the dictator. Quadrant 4 can just take over. It has a propensity to yell and force its ideas and plans on others, and therefore can be quite intimidating, particularly to the Quadrant 2 and 3. As I mentioned before, workaholic is a sign that the Quadrant 4 is really in the extreme. And it does often confuse activity with accomplishment. So there's lots of noise and action and not necessarily results forthcoming, although they usually do come, but it's just so much going on. It really stirs the dust up. So if one was to rediscover one's Quadrant 4, and we'll go through this in various podcasts, however, looking at a disruptive style, you just say no to someone without giving them a reason. Or you'd make that difficult phone call that you've been meaning to do for a long time, just get it done. That's the Quadrant 4, just pick up the phone and have that conversation. Quadrant 4 part loves to stir things up, therefore interrupt 5 conversations today. Just barge in and change the topic totally. Taking charge of that conversation. When it gets an electronic part or an electronic gizmo, a gadget or appliance, very rarely would it go to the instruction manual. So it would just wing it and work it out as it goes. So maybe try that one on. Tell someone that they're wrong. That's a very blatant, confronting thing that the Quadrant 4 part has no problems with. You could do twice as much today than you normally do or see or produce. And changing an appointment with someone at the last minute. Ordering 3 people to do things for you today, just getting out there and telling people what they need to do to help you. Insist on getting only the facts from someone. Don't worry me with all the fluff, just give me the facts. This is the style of the Quadrant 4. So, you might come up with, and this is a classic with the Quadrant 4, come up with an idea that's someone else's and claim it as yours. And this is, and we'll go into this more in one of the podcasts, but in terms of influencing the Quadrant 4 part, you just plant a few ideas that that the Quadrant 4 will take on board. The Quadrant 4 part will never acknowledge that idea right there and then, but will tend to come back to you at some stage in the fairly near future and release this great discovery of this idea that you had mentioned as theirs, and they'll have full buy-in to it. So there's a there's upsides and downsides, as I said, with every one of these quadrants. They all work together, and the challenge in life is to be able to use our quadrants appropriately. So to use our 1, our 2, our 3, our 4 as they fire from one to the other, and be able to process things in a way that gets the outcomes that we're after. There's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. It's simply what are the outcomes that you're after, and then what is the neurology you're using in order to get those outcomes. And as we get into discussions on teams and groups and so forth and relationships, then we'll see that everyone brings a special something to a relationship, and it's the wise person who observes that from a quadrant position and then employs that person or uses that person or acknowledges that person for the brilliance that they have and the contribution that they have to the full picture. So anyway, so there's the very brief discussion on quadrant 4, just to get you on the page, as we've done with all the last 3 quadrants as well, just to get you a basic understanding of it, and so that use these first podcasts as references. So as down the track we're talking about various issues, we're interviewing people or whatever the content may be that mentions certain quadrants, and you've always got these reference points. You can flick back and pick up one of these podcasts and go through it and refresh your memory on what it is that we're talking about. So until next time, have an amazing day, have an amazing week and an amazing future. And I'm Mark Postles, and I'll catch you on the next podcast. Let us show you how to fire your brain in ways that serve you so that you can be confident, connected, and bring joy and passion into what you do every day. Get a free copy of my book, The In8 Model. Go to the in8model.com/free book.